Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. I'm Frater Eleftheria, and tonight I'm going to be talking to you about another great mystery of the Kabbalah, that is the parts of the soul, the parts of the human soul according to the mystical system of the Kabbalah. This is another area where there's not a lot of knowledge out there that's easily accessible, so I'm going to try and explain my understanding of the parts of the soul of the Kabbalah. So I'm going to be drawing very much on the tradition of the Kabbalah, the traditional understanding of the parts of the soul, but I'm also going to touch upon some observations that I've made where there's similarities between this system of the Kabbalistic parts of the soul and the Five Koshas in the Vedic tradition. And I'm going to be explaining a little bit about the way that the parts of the soul and our understanding of them can lead us to an understanding of moving towards greater healing and unity within ourselves and also as a species. So most people are familiar with the concept of a soul, which exists in various different forms across different cultures, and in the Kabbalistic tradition coming from Jewish mysticism, there is a conception of the soul which is very different again. And it's not just the soul as we understand it, as kind of like a phantasmal thing that inhabits us, but it can also intersect with some of the bodily aspects of our being, some of the mental aspects of our being, as we shall see. And so the Kabbalistic concept of the soul really encompasses the whole human being, and there's different parts of the soul which correspond to the different parts of us, you know, whether it's part of our mind, body or spirit, which make us up as a human being. So I'll go through each of the parts in turn. There's 5 in total. I will begin with the lowermost part, the part that is closest to the physical body, and work my way up. So the first part of the soul in Kabbalah is known as the Nephesh. This is a word which is very closely related to the word for breath. It's also very closely related to the word life. And so it's related to the breath of life that is breathed into the human being, and it is also linked to the lifeblood of the human being. And so it's kind of like a vital force, you might say. It's kind of related to that idea, but to be more exact, it is the part of the soul which is closest to the physical body. It kind of is bodily in nature. You know, you could even see it as being related to hormones from the endocrine glands and the pituitary gland and all that sort of thing. It's very much related to our instincts, the animalistic part of our nature, which is very much bound in the material, and the vital parts of our nature. And as it's associated with physicality, it's very much associated with the world of Chiah in the Kabbalah. If you don't know about the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah and you want to understand the references that I make to them in this video, I would highly recommend watching my video on the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah, which you'll be able to find in the Kabbalah playlist on this channel, which I'll link in the description below. Now, in my opinion, there's a very close correlation between the Nephesh of the Kabbalah and the pranamaya kosha in the Vedic tradition. This is the vital body or the etheric body of theosophy. Again, very much related to instinct, very closely related to the physical, and possibly even intersecting with it, but not identical with the physical body, which is the sheath below the pranamaya kosha. And it is the Nephesh that really gives us our instinct, our impulses, our passions. Passion not in the sense of something that we enjoy or that we value, but in the sense of that raw desire. So above the Nephesh, there is the second part of the soul, which is the Ruach. So the word Ruach, like the word Nephesh, is related to the breath. However, the word Ruach has further associations such as spirit, related to the idea of spirit. Some people's interpretation, it's like not spirit necessarily in the sense of like the spirit world, but like a vibe or an aesthetic or a feeling, kind of like if you think about the spirit of a football team at a football game, something like that, spirit in that sense. And so it's related to spirit in that sense, and it's also related to mind. And so we have a very mental part of the soul here, very related to the thought processes that we have, but also to emotion and being emotionally invested and getting in touch with that part of us. And the world of the Kabbalah that this part of the soul resides in is in Yechidah, which is all about forms and ideas and structures in the intellectual sense. And so we can see a kind of observation of form through the intellect and the emotions taking place in the part of the soul that is known as the Ruach. And, you know, if you wanted to divide things into the lower and the higher mind, you would say that the Ruach represents the lower mind. It's not the higher order abstract thinking of the higher mind, but more just processing of information and linked into emotional reactions and responses. So the part of the Five Koshas symbol, which I think closely resembles this part of the soul in Kabbalah, is that of the Mana-Maya kosha, which is again related to both intellect and emotions, and it is considered to be related to the functions of the lower mind. It's really about rather than making value judgments, it's like the higher mind is, it's really about processing information. It's like the chat GPT level of mind. It can regurgitate and synthesize and repeat, but it cannot actually create anything new. So the next part of the soul above the Ruach is the Neschamah. This is sometimes labeled as the higher aspirations. And as the name suggests, this part of the soul is very related to the higher mind, the higher functions of the mind. Value judgments, thinking in a highly abstract way as well, thinking in terms of pure concepts. The word Neschamah is very related to the Hebrew word Shem, which means a name, as in Hashem, which is often one of the names attributed to God, simply meaning the name. But it's more than just a name, it's also referring to a key concept that is behind the name. And so when it is said in the Bible to spread the name of God to all the world, it's not so much referring to the literal name that needs to be spoken to everyone, but to introduce people to the key underlying concept that will help us to understand God at a deep level. And all of these qualities of the Neschamah fit very neatly in the level of the four worlds that this part of the soul resides in, which is the world of Bria, which corresponds very closely in turn with the Sephirah on the tree of life known as Bina, which means understanding. And so Neschamah is very much a place of understanding and comprehension. And to add another layer of symbolism, Bina as the place where one of the hayas in the four-letter name is placed. It has very watery symbolism, as one of the hayas represents the element of water, hay being one of the four letters in the four-lettered name of God, Yod He Vav He. Another key concept in Kabbalah. And so with the waters we see arguably a connection to the intuitive parts of the mind, which perhaps arise from a part of the mind that is less mired in concepts and bogged down in rigid concepts and is much more connected to a free-flowing and kind of unified field of higher thought, such as exists in the Neschamah, and which is a more Briatic level of consciousness. And I think that this part of the soul in Kabbalah corresponds very closely to the Vijnana Maya Kosha in the Vedic tradition. This is the higher mind or discriminating mind. Not discriminating as in, being prejudiced against people, but discriminating as in being able to judge right from wrong and come up with qualitative categories and value judgments around key concepts. So according to Kabbalistic scholars, every human being is in touch with these first three parts of the soul that I have mentioned. But there are two other parts above that which are much closer to God, much closer to divinity, and thus not accessed by all but a few very lucky human beings who manage to develop themselves enough to be able to reach that level of unity with God, and so to be aware of that part of their soul that is closest to God. The first of these is the level known as Chiah. So this is the part of the soul in Kabbalah that occupies the world of Atziluth, very much a world of pure divinity. And so what this part of the soul really represents is the force of pure divinity, that the creative force of pure divinity expressed in the universe, in my opinion, very closely associated with the concept of the Logos, which appears in Christianity but also in Greek Platonism and Neoplatonism. And that would be a good fit because, of course, the world of Chiah corresponds to the letter Yod in the four-lettered name, which in turn corresponds to the Sephirah of Chokhmah on the Tree of Life, which is where the Logos, or the Word of God, is said to reside in Christian Kabbalah. Unlike the kind of reified and distant and somewhat still and silent principle of the highest levels of divinity, such as we see in, say, Keter, this is very much the creative force of divinity. Divinity expressing itself as that creative power, that life-giving power. And when we tap into that in ourselves, we're tapping into our haya. So the thing that is unique about haya is it has substance and it has energy and force behind it, but it is completely unconditioned. It doesn't really have any qualities that make it distinct from any of the things of the created universe, because it's very close to the unity and the wholeness of divinity. And so I think that this part of the soul is related to the Anandamaya Kosha in Vedic traditions, and I also think that it's related to the Buddhata in Buddhism, what is sometimes referred to as the undefiled mind or storehouse consciousness. This is kind of like it's the container of consciousness, but without anything in it. And the final part of the soul is the Yechidah. This corresponds to the Adam Kadmon, which is an idea in Kabbalah. It's technically related to the four worlds, but it's kind of a figure who sits above the four worlds as kind of like almost like an image of the divine. But as a representation of Adam, it's actually the archetypal human being. And so this is representative of the highest Sephirah of Keter on the Tree of Life. And so it represents pure divinity. And at this point, we're beyond substance and force, and it's just that pure oneness that divinity represents. And everything, every other concept, every other dimension being absorbed into that, every other principle being absorbed into that. And so as a kind of representation of that inner core of divinity, the Yechidah represents the very essence of soul. And in the belief system of Thelema, the Yechidah actually corresponds with the holy guardian angel. And If you don't know what the Holy Guardian Angel is, I've got some videos on that, which I'd recommend you go watch. But basically, it's related to the divine essence within us, the divine part of our nature. And it's also very related to Atman, which is the part of the Vedic system related to the koshas and the sheaths and what lies within them, which I think corresponds to the Yechidah. I think that Atman and the Yechidah are more or less analogous ideas, and matches with the rest of the attributions that I have made with other parts of the soul and the five koshas in terms of the order in which they appear. So that gives us an overview of the 5 parts of the soul according to Kabbalah. Now, why is it important to know about these different parts of us? Is it just to take a catalogue of all the different things that make up us? Well, no. Really, if you want to understand the purpose of this teaching, it's really so that we can understand the pieces of ourself through the study of Kabbalah, particularly the concept of the emanation from the Ein Sof Or, and particularly in terms of the creation of the Qliphoth, the throwing off of the Qliphothic shells, which I will do a separate video on one day, and the concept of Tikkun Olam, which seeks to reverse some of that process. What we see really is that creation, the created universe that we inhabit, is one that is sundered. That is to say, it's broken up into little pieces and it's thrown into disorder. So all of the pieces are in a relationship with one another which is not harmonious and not correct. And so part of the process of healing ourselves, of healing the human race, and ultimately of healing creation, is by putting the pieces back together in the correct order and their correct relationship with one another. And so this teaching of the parts of the soul and their correct relation to one another is actually a very beautiful teaching. To illustrate a bit more deeply what I'm talking about, I just want to share a story from my childhood. So when I was young, I was very into Power Rangers. You might remember Power Rangers. I don't know, maybe you're younger than me and it's before your time. But you had 5 Power Rangers, each a different colour, and who are the protagonists of this series, going out fighting evil. And each Power Ranger piloted a robot known as a Zord as part of what they did in their heroic exploits, with each Zord kind of taking the form of a different animal. But the thing with the Power Rangers was there was an individual Zord for each Power Ranger, but when they really needed to do battle with serious evil, the 5 Zords could join into a single Zord known as the Megazord. So the robots would change their shape so they could fit together in a certain way. So one would become a foot, another one would become a torso, and they'd all join together into this greater being known as the Megazord. And there was a level above that as well, which was the Super Megazord, which is when the green Power Ranger, who was kind of like the dark horse who came and went, where he introduced his Zord, the Dragon Zord, it made another level, the Super Megazord, and then there was another level, the Ultra Zord, where there was a kind of a Brachiosaurus type of a robot that got connected with the Super Megazord to make the Ultra Zord. And so I loved Power Rangers, and I had a lot of Power Ranger toys, and I had 6 of the 7 Zords that I needed to create the Ultra Zord. But I didn't have the last piece, so I couldn't make the Ultra Zord. But as it turned out, there was a friend that I had who lived on the same street a few houses down, who had this other Zord, the kind of Brachiosaurus-looking Zord. And so we decided that together we were going to finally create the Ultra Zord. And so he came over one day with his toy, and we put the Zords together to finally create the Ultra Zord. And it was a very satisfying moment for both of us. This is us. We finally made the Ultra Zord. That's the small, skinny, pale one is me. But, you know, it was a feeling of pure satisfaction, finally being able to put all of the disparate pieces together to create something that was complete. And that is kind of like the process that we need to go through with the parts of the soul. We have all these disparate parts. You know, the Neschamah, the Nephesh, the Ruach, the Chiah, the Yechidah. They're all like the individual Zords, which are scattered and not at their full power until they are joined together in the proper order. And all of them need to be joined for us to have that moment of feeling complete and whole and utterly satisfied and in a state of oneness. So how are we supposed to order the parts of our soul to be in harmony with the divine, to be in its proper place and in a perfect synchronization and a perfect oneness and wholeness? Well, that is the purpose of this diagram here. The haya and the yechida do not appear here, but they're up the top. You know, you've got yechida here, and then further down you've got haya, and then you've got these levels here. That doesn't change, and those parts of the soul, those levels of the soul, are relatively disconnected from anything that happens in the human realm because they're so close to God. But this part can be influenced by human behavior and how we relate to our environment. So we have the Neschamah at the top here, the higher aspirations. Then we have the Ruach here, which is the reason, more or less. And the Nephesh, which is the passions, more or less. And the proper relation between all of these parts is represented by the good angel, Michael. And what Michael represents is the reason and the passions under the control or the guidance of the higher aspirations. And in this arrangement of the good angel Michael, the reason remains free from domination by the passions. The opposite of that is represented by Samael, the evil angel, representing the opposite tendency. A good way of thinking of these two angels is like the angel and the devil on each of our shoulders, as is commonly depicted in popular culture. And so what Samael represents is the passions dominating the reason and being utterly disconnected from the guidance of the Neschamah. And so, of course, the reason would have a very strained and vexed relationship with the Neschamah as well. And so the goal is the disposition of the good angel Michael and try and overcome the bad disposition of Samael. And this part of the diagram, known as the Zelem, this is the double image of the self, or the personality, the face that we present to life. And it's really a double image because it's a mirror image of both the good and the evil angel. Because we have the potential to be an angel or a devil, as it is said, based purely on our actions, on the choices that we make, whether we accumulate good karma through our actions or whether we accumulate bad karma. And so that is the right relationship of the parts of the soul. according to Kabbalah, for these lower parts of the soul that every human being is in touch with. But in order to really undo the sundering, in order to really undergo the process of tikkun olam, or repairing the world in the microcosmic world of our own individual self, we also need to bridge the gulf that disconnects these parts of us from those two higher parts of our soul, the haya and the yechida. And so the way we do that is by trying to get in touch with Atman within ourselves, as would be said in the Vedic tradition. But there is also concepts in the Western esoteric tradition which help us to understand a bit better this idea of how we can reconnect with those highest parts of our soul, the very essence of divinity within us. And the most elegant way in which this is represented is in the formula of Yod, He, Shin, Vav, He, depicted below. That is the name of each of these 5 letters, these 5 Hebrew letters. Now, I've spoken before in this video about the 4-lettered name of God, the tetragrammaton Yod, He, Vav, He, a very important concept in Judaism, a very important concept in the mystical system of the Kabbalah in particular. More than just representing the name of God, it also represents a 4-fold division of creation, including within the human being, including within the parts of the soul. So there are 5 parts of the soul, and there are 5 letters represented here. And as the parts of the soul correspond to one of the 4 worlds of the Kabbalah, plus the Adam Kadmon, and each of those in turn corresponds to one of the classical elements, and each one of those in turn corresponds with one of the letters that are depicted here, it's quite easy to make a connection between the parts of the soul and the 4-lettered name tetragrammaton plus this shin. Well, so first of all, what does the tetragrammaton part of this represent? The Yod, He, Vav, He down here. And then we need to talk about what this shin here represents. So to start with the Yod, He, Vav, He, it's the 4 elements, so it's the 4-fold structure of creation. So for the Chiah, you've got the element of fire and the Yod. For the Neschamah, you've got the element of water and the first He. For the Ruach, you've got the element of air and the letter Vav. And for the Nephesh, you've got the element of earth and the final He. You might think of it as like how the human being, in the human world, is how the human being exists in a natural form, in a natural state in the created universe, but not necessarily connected to the pure divine essence at the core of all things, including us. That pure divine essence, which corresponds with the element of pure spirit, is represented by the shin. And so in the magical formula of Hebrew letters that is depicted here, we have the shin descending down to be in the middle of the letters of the 4-lettered name. And so the name of God, representing all creation, Yod, He, Vav, He, is transformed into Yod, He, Shin, Vav, He, which, when you pronounce it, reads Yeshua, the Saviour. And so now this is getting into the domain of Christian Kabbalah, which went on to influence esoteric groups such as the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn. So what can we draw out from this cryptic symbolism of the name Yeshua being created by the descent of the Shin of spirit? Well, the first connection to make is with the Adam Kadmon, the image of the archetypal or perfect or heavenly human being, which represents the element of spirit, as it represents the Yechidah, It's the fifth and highest level of this arrangement as it's placed through the worlds of the Kabbalah. But it also represents Atman. So if you follow the Western esoteric tradition, then already there is a hint here that in order to complete the formula, in order to transform Yod-He Vav-He into Yeshua and bring Yeshua into that created reality, knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel is the step which must be taken. That is the way to embody the divine within the physical world, for the descent of the divine parts of us to unite with the non-divine, if there can be such a thing, parts of us. The more separated from the divine parts of us, let's say. The physical or material or up to the mental parts of us. And so to use another symbol that's often used in the Western esoteric tradition, you have the base of the pyramid, the square base of the pyramid, which represents the four elements, being the four corners or the four sides perhaps of the base, which is then crowned by the capstone of spirit, which is the fifth vector, the fifth element, which completes the structure and completes, makes it possible for there to be a representation of the union of divine and human. And this pattern, this symbolism is repeated in Liber Samek, the ritual, one of the rituals in Thelema to attain knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel. And that's what the fifth element is all about, together with some secrets of Tantra and stuff like that. So go back and watch that movie again, knowing what you know about the five elements and the union of creation in love. So that was a bit of a digression, but this is how we achieve salvation. It's through this process that we can achieve salvation, which is why all of this is being linked to the name Yeshua. And of course, Yeshua, Jesus, in the Christian tradition, was seen as a second Adam. He was seen as being a human being who, by being spiritually pure, was able to restore humanity from its fallen state to its primordial state of perfection, which is the goal of recalibrating the parts of the soul into their proper relationship. And so that is the importance of the parts of the soul in Kabbalah, and that is my explanation of the parts of the soul according to the mystical tradition of the Kabbalah. I hope that you enjoyed this video. If you did, please like, subscribe to this channel to support my work, subscribe to me also on Odyssey, and if you want to give me extra support, if you really appreciate the work that I'm doing on this channel, please hit join down below and become a member, or you can thank me with super thanks by pressing the thanks button down below. But thank you again for listening, and I'll see you next time.